Shrek is a masterpiece of musical storytelling. There, I said it. This film, and really by extension the rest of the film series, not you, but the rest of the Shrek film series is a fantastic case study for what film music can do. This is not a joke, this is not a meme. I get it, you see a video about Shrek and you're like, oh god, the classic music snob is going to try and be funny and make memey outdated Shrek jokes and just come off as a cringy version of Squidward having an existential crisis. But I'm serious, the music in Shrek is an absolute fantastic expression of what film scoring can accomplish. I can't emphasize this enough. I'm not kidding. Shrek is one of the most amazing film scores I've ever come across. But in order to explain it, I kind of got to go over how I got here. So since starting this whole YouTube thing and spending literally all my time either looking up, thinking about, or talking about film scores, or at the very least something related to film scoring, I've just been swarmed by people asking me what my opinions are about pop music. And not like oh, could you do a pop music review of my favorite tune, but more specifically like, what are my thoughts on when a film uses pop music either as an addition to or as an outright replacement for a film's original score. And the truth is, I've made multiple videos on it, and I haven't been particularly kind to pop music in general. It's honestly been really difficult for me to just talk about pop music in general, let alone in a narrative sense without coming off as a neckbeard, especially when it comes to discussing the more subtle nuances of how I feel about inserting pop music as a film scoring technique. But then a film came out. A film so remarkable that it brought everyone together. It sparked a rare discussion where everyone, big and small, young and old, all agreed about how that film had impacted our short time on this little blue marble. And that film was Suicide Squad. To be clear, because we live in dark times, this film sucks. But don't take my word for it. Take it from this guy who has oh so very clearly gone to grad school. I mean, just look at him. I think the chugging cough syrup gives it away. This is Dan Olson, who operates, owns, and is free to command his will over the YouTube channel Folding Ideas. And one of his pioneering videos is a 35-ish minute extravaganza on how exactly Suicide Squad sucks so much. Now, I've used this clip from this video before because it's one of my favorite little clips on the entirety of YouTube. And it's when he talks about the musical choices in Suicide Squad.
And I haven't even addressed the soundtrack yet. This trailer-style peppy montage relies heavily on pop music in the bluntest way possible. It's a prison in Louisiana. House of the Rising Sun by the Animals. Harley Isn't Your Plaything. You Don't Own Me by Leslie Gore. Amanda Waller is bad and she's going to introduce a bunch of devils. Sympathy for the devil. Harley's a super freak, so let's just play super freak. An Aussie who does dirty deeds? Dirty deeds, done dirt cheap.
Now, just to be clear, what he's saying is that the usage of pop music in this film is incredibly superficial, so much so that you could reduce the usage of said pop music to merely just the title and understand completely exactly how and why the producers used that specific piece of music in that specific scene. But hold on a minute. How is that any different from Shrek? When he's in his swamp and he's treating himself to a hashtag self-care day, we hear All-Star by Smash Mouth. He's treating himself, he's an all-star. We get Bad Reputation by Joan Jett when Shrek's wrestling with the Knights. He literally doesn't care what anyone thinks about him. We get I'm on My Way by the Proclaimers when Shrek and Donkey go off on their journey. Right here, we get a song called My Beloved Monster. That's a little on the nose, don't you think? We get Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah when everyone's sad. It even ends with Donkey singing Neil Diamond's I'm a Believer because, well, now he believes in love, or something. And it doesn't end there, this whole pattern continues on to the second film. It opens with Accidentally in Love by Counting Crows, which, I think is the best summary of the first film. We get Funky Town when the group arrives at Far, Far Away, probably because this place is so different to what Shrek is familiar with. A song literally titled I Need Some Sleep plays when Shrek is lying awake and can't sleep. Ever Fallen in Love plays when Shrek is stealing a potion from the factory. He's doing something crazy because, well, have you ever fallen in love? Changes plays after Shrek and Donkey. You guessed it, Change. Then the fairy godmother literally screams, holding out for a hero into a microphone as Shrek is storming the castle, which is a moment I've heard a lot of fans talk about being the most epic moment in the whole trilogy. That's right. Trilogy. So put a pin in this scene, we'll come back to it. But this film ends with Puss in Boots and Donkey singing Livin' La Vida Loca, which means living a crazy life, which if that isn't a great summary of Shrek, then I don't know what is. So I think you get the point. This perfectly valid and poignant criticism against Suicide Squad and its obnoxious inclusion of pop music can also be said for what happened to Shrek. But before we go there, let's hit the brakes and back up for a minute. Why does Shrek have all this pop music in it in the first place? Now, plenty of films have included pop music in their score, so hearing pop tunes in this movie movie wasn't exactly revolutionary. You can look at a film like The Graduate, which included a lot of works from Simon and Garfunkel, or you can go back further and talk about how Casablanca used As Time Goes By. If you want to get technical about it, you could say the same thing for the Beatles' Yellow Submarine or The Wall by Pink Floyd. If you want to get really philosophical about it, you could talk about how The Jazz Singer, the first ever film with synchronized sound, basically just used popular music of the day. I think anyone can think of a film that heavily relies on the use of pop music, and the silver screen isn't really the only place you're going to find this kind of stuff. A jukebox musical is a musical that, instead of using original music, uses pop music instead. So you can look at something like Mamma Mia, which used songs from ABBA. So this whole idea of relying on pop music isn't anything new, but why does Shrek rely so heavily on those pieces of pop music? Well, I think it comes down to the anti-Disney message contained within Shrek. So in case you're unaware, there was some drama in the Disney executive world. If you want more detail on this, you can look up one of the dozens of other video essays on Shrek out there. No, seriously, there are a lot of people talking about these films, from the fan remakes to even a Marxist reading on the first film. Shrek really impacted people. Anyway, so the way the story goes is that Jeffrey Katzenberg and Mike Eisner were at Disney. They didn't like each other. Something happens. I don't know. I don't care. Then Katzenberg leaves Disney to go start DreamWorks. Something, Shrek. And when you look at Shrek through an analytical lens, it's basically one massive multi-layered criticism of the Disney Renaissance in the 1990s, which again, everyone has pointed out. So there are a dozen and a half ways to read this. Maybe it's about Disney copywriting public domain stories and characters. Maybe Farquaad is an Eisner stand-in. Maybe it's a critique on the hyper-commercialization of the Disney brand, which is why even though everything about Duloc is coded to be a mock Disneyland, when the town is empty, it sounds like a department store.
Too quiet.
No matter how you read it, Shrek is very anti-Disney, and it appears that the narrative itself is meant to be a nuanced criticism of the validity and pertinence of the quote-unquote traditional fairy tale and how it pertains to happiness. To be clear, I think Shrek, as a narrative, is stronger than all the Disney Renaissance films combined. Like, it's almost been 2 decades and Disney still can't figure out how to make a self-rescuing princess to the caliber of Fiona.
There, I said it. Let the comments rain on me like snow on a hot desert.
But to that end, seeing that this is the anti-Disney film, it stands to reason that the inclusion of these pieces of pop music served to criticize and undermine the more theatrical or even stage musical nature of the Disney Renaissance films. If you want more info on that, I actually have a video that you can check out that talks just about that. So instead of having the characters sing an I Want song or a villain song or whatever the hell this thing is that Iago sings, they just have pop music. Shrek has no I Want song. In the opening of the film, he wants for nothing. He's perfectly content. He's an all-star. And to that end, the pop music serves as a subversive commentary on the necessity of musical theater numbers that question the diegesis of the film. Unlike Pixar, that also did not have musical numbers, Shrek draws attention to it with similarly vocal music that does not exist in the universe of the film. But here's the thing, if we just stop here and just sit at this level, then there's really not that much of a difference in how both Suicide Squad and Shrek use pop music. We can identify how and why what pieces of music were chosen to fit within a specific scene based almost explicitly on the context of the scene and the title of the piece of music. And if you've seen a lot of my content, then you'll know that I'm not super jazzed about just plugging in something from the producer's Spotify playlist because they think that's what sounds good or because they think it fits. So at the moment, it almost looks like the inclusion of pop music strips Shrek of the emotional impact that the music can have, except that that isn't the case. Like, hang on, this scene makes me feel things. It's good, not bad, but why is it not bad? Well, let's compare these two scenes. Pay attention to this scene where Shrek dropkicks this knight. We're listening to Joan Jett's Bad Reputation. Now compare that to the scene where Shrek and Donkey are running away from the dragon after Shrek frees Fiona. Now aside from having a wonderful reference to the Dies Irae right here,
I'll take care of the dragon.
this is original score by Harry Gregson Williams and John Powell, who up to this point had already worked together on films like Ants and Chicken Run. And like what I said with Guardians of the Galaxy 7.5 centuries ago, this film is not explicitly pop music, it has original score as well. As even the most casual Shrek fan will tell you, this film has a hypnotically mesmerizing main theme. It reappears constantly, referencing the love between Shrek and Fiona, the main story,
a princess locked in a tower and beset by a dragon is rescued by a brave knight, and then they share
the narrative sense of what makes up Shrek. And so naturally, it comes back in the second film as well.
Best for you. Maybe you should do the same.
She's finally found the prince of her dreams.
But look at me.
Thanks. Now, where were we?
Oh, I remember.
So taking another step back, what's the difference between this scene and this scene? Well, the cage match between Shrek and the guards, that's mostly played for a joke, right? It really isn't that significant in the story moving forward beyond demonstrating to Farquaad that Shrek might be the best chance he has at getting his hands on Fiona in the most literal sense. But this scene, where Shrek rescues Fiona, is where these two meet. It's essential in establishing the foundation for their relationship.
You didn't slay the dragon?
It's on my to-do list. Now come on!
It's a significant moment in the film. It isn't Shrek farting in a swamp. It isn't Donkey peeing out a fire pit. It isn't some other montage moment. This scene really matters. And the film does not trust pop music to be able to carry the most emotional moments of the story. We get the main theme as Shrek approaches Fiona, the genesis of their relationship. We get it diegetically when Fiona's trying to be a princess and ends up killing a bird. She's singing our main theme, in essence, revealing her true nature in more ways than one. And we get it when she's transforming, admitting to herself what she really is. It's the leitmotif that carries the significance of this story's moral. And that is, in essence, why everyone says that the ending to Shrek 2 sounds so amazing. Everyone just thinks that this song sounds amazing, but it isn't just this song. Listen. Let me see if I can refresh your memory on where that melody comes from. What we're actually getting here is exactly what we got during this scene in Spider-Verse. If you want to know more about the Spider-Verse, feel free to check out my other video below. What? I have a lot of videos, sue me. But we're getting a mixture of holding out for a hero and some of the original hero theme that we heard from the first film, because again, Shrek is coming to rescue Fiona. That's what makes this moment so intense. That's what makes it feel so epic. But what, does that just mean that all the pop music isn't as good as the original score? Is this the part where I get to be all condescending and pretentious and tell you that I told you so and that pop music just sucks and will never be useful in the film? Well, no. None of this would work if it wasn't for the inclusion of the pop music, and we know that because of Donkey. There's something about Donkey that's very special. Throughout the entire story, Donkey is always incredibly sincere. He doesn't care about the external pressures on him. He doesn't need that outside influence. He's totally comfortable being exactly who he is. Compare that to someone like Fiona or the King, who have to literally hide who they are from the public and keep their true identities a secret. Or even look at someone like Shrek, who, even though he seems content in the opening of the first film, really just wants people to understand that he isn't what people immediately think of him.
People take one look at me and go, "Ah, help, run! A big, stupid, ugly ogre." They judge me before they even know me.
But there's something else important about Donkey. He's an exceptionally musical character.
'Cause I'm all alone. There's no one here beside me. On the road again. Sing it with me, Shrek. I can't wait to get on the road again.
What did I say about singing? All right, you're going the right way for a smack bottom.
Look, you love this woman, don't you?
Yes.
You want to hold her?
Yes.
Please her?
Yes.
Then you got to try a little tenderness.
In a film that seeks to undermine the Disney formula, Donkey is the only character that constantly and diegetically, or in other words, within the context of the film, sings and makes music. The most sincere, the most self-actualized character in the story is also the most musical. This creates a parallel between the origin of the various pieces of music that we hear throughout the film. The pieces of pop music come to represent external pressures on the characters that inhibit their ability to freely express themselves, while the original score reveals their true identities. Yes, we see Shrek perfectly content in his swamp, but through the magic of already knowing the story, we the audience know that Shrek is lonely and isn't completely happy with his existence. He'd like a friend, all while we hear All-Star. We know that in part he's playing along with society's expectations of what an ogre is. We hear Bad Reputation when Shrek's fighting the knights, but that's not who he is. He likes chilling in his swamp. He doesn't want the glory of the center stage. It's a facade. Neither of these characters intrinsically want to be going on a journey to get a princess from a castle. They have to via external pressures. Even this love montage where we hear My Beloved Monster, as much as these two characters are coming together, there's a falsity to it. The Fiona that Shrek is falling in love with has a performative element to it that emulates a false persona. In part, this development is fueled by Fiona's internalization of society telling her that she can't be an ogre. You can actually see this pattern reach its conclusion at the end of the first film when we hear I'm a Believer. It begins with the original recording, but then gets picked up by Donkey. This transition from non-diegetic original recording to a diegetic performance by Donkey musically emulates the conclusion of the story. The main characters are now accepted by society as they are, not as they have to be through societal pressures. We transition from a montage-y style pop tune insert to the most sincere musical expression by Donkey, all while finally having musical support by the other characters, mirroring how the outcasts have finally found their place. Which all compounds the main theme of the film. It's that the path to true happiness is one of self-actualization that will most likely defy societal norms in one way or another. Who cares if you aren't doing it the way people want you to? If it makes you happy, then that's what's important. And when we see those genuine moments of confidence and sincerity in these characters' identities, that's when we hear the main theme. As great as it is to like these pieces of pop music, they're constructed to be the most popular, not necessarily the most specific. As much as these pieces might sound fantastic, the necessity to appeal to such a massive audience mirrors the needs for the characters in Shrek to navigate the external pressures and conform to societal expectations. But if the moral of the story is that you have to be yourself in order to be happy, no matter what anyone else says, then really, that means that Shrek would need something more personal and sincere to represent his story, like his own unique theme. That's what makes the final conflict of the fairy godmother so musically and thematically intense. The external societal pressures of what Shrek and Fiona should do are represented in the pop tune that the fairy godmother, the villain, is diegetically singing, in direct conflict with the originally scored hero's theme that represents Shrek's desire to not abandon Fiona for a life of conformity. And this musical representation of the triumph of self-expression over societal expectations resonated with people so well that in an ironic twist, the music that DreamWorks used to represent a film that would mock Disney inadvertently became their version of Jiminy Cricket singing When You Wish Upon a Star. But that's what makes this moment so epic. That's why the usage of pop music doesn't suck in Shrek and it does in Suicide Squad. It's because here it served a purpose, here it was just awful. And that's why we remember the main theme to Shrek, regardless of how many times we hear Smash Mouth. That's why the music in Shrek is so groundbreaking. And that's why the soundtrack to Shrek is genius.